We now move to the first planet, that is Mercury. From the last stage, we learned of the process by which the planet, or the first planet, or the planet in the first stage of its evolution, is ejected by the sun. That ejection creates a circulatory path where it revolves around the sun, harnessed by its magnetism. This magnetism allows it over time to encircle the sun. This process of the encirclement of the sun continues and creates a situation where, as we discussed before, in antiperistasis, where the shell is frozen or solidifies. Let us look a little more closely at the process. There is evidence, scientific evidence, to show that the element in the center of the sun can be, or there is evidence to show that it is copernicium, which has been named after ancient philosopher Copernicus, who came up with the understanding strongly that there were more than one planet and that the Earth revolved around the sun rather than the sun revolving around the Earth. This element is particularly interesting because it is a heavy element of about 121, let's say for weight reasons, 121 of X, compared to 92 of X for uranium, which is what I believe that makes up the cover or the crust of Mercury. It is consistent with the color of uranium. It is consistent with the breakdown of or nuclear transmutation from copernicium, that the next viable element, which is silvery like the surface of Mercury, and which can withstand the temperatures and which has the criteria, as you will see later on, for the development by nuclear transmutation of the other elements. So let us look at our friend Mercury and see how Mercury has formed and evolved over time. Mercury as a planet is rather interesting, and when you examine the surface, you see very many pock-marked areas. It seems that there are many craters on Mercury, and these craters on Mercury are very obvious. Scientists have indicated that those craters were formed by meteors colliding with the surface of Mercury in a consistently inconsistent pattern that has created these pock-marked shapes, or that has created those craters on Mercury. My theory looks at it differently. The pockmark didn't come from without, they came from within. And it is our dear friend Aristotle who, with his theory of antiperistasis, created an understanding that where there is a creation, an item of purity, it is natural law that impurities would attack it. It is in its basic form. But more complex understanding would tell you that what is actually happening is that, as I spoke earlier, the center of the planet continues to have fusion and fission and splitting of the atoms. This process continues, and as it continues, it creates a situation where there is a buildup of temperature and pressure within the planetary orb. This increase in temperature and pressure continues significantly until it reaches a point where it is no longer able to contain itself within the planet. As a result, of this process, there is a rupturing of the surface of the planet. This rupturing of the surface creates what we call on Earth a volcano. That volcano allows an opening for a release of the molten material inside of the planet, creating a regulation of pressure, thus allowing the planet to go back to its normal process. This means that over millions and millions of years, you have many volcanic eruptions to release the energy on Mercury. As a result of that, you have a pock-marked situation and the development of a terrestrial, I think that is the wrong word, the development of a surface on the planet, which allows you to then see mountains being formed, which is not inconsistent with what we have on planet Earth. This process continues for many years, millions of years, billions of years. The continuation of this process creates a situation where there is the beginning of momentum of the planet. Mercury, because of the strong magnetic force of the sun, is not able to release itself from the solar rays or the solar power, the solar magnetism. And so what occurs is that it creates a situation where it tries now to divest itself of the sun through the pressure created by motion. So let us visualize it this way. Let's take a balloon and put that balloon on a string. The balloon is blown and on a string. Let us take a pin and prick that balloon. What happens is that the area of release of air creates a force which, because it is constrained by the string, starts a rotational force, because that is the easiest movement for the balloon. So let us call the solar magnetic force the string, and let us call the volcano, wherever it occurs on Mars, the jet of air. You can see that you have the beginnings with that over time of a motion which begins the rotational process of the planet, which we will discuss when we get further and further into the discussion and we get closer to a planet like Mercury, which is in its other stage of planetary development. This planetary stage I call the incubation stage. As a child, incubation, incubative. So it is a stage which it is like a baby developing, and so it is the beginnings of the planet. Mercury is very interesting and is the basis by which other planets are formed. The volcanoes, as we have common on Earth now, have not changed in many million years. And as we get into the qualitative, or should I say, understanding more and more the time component that is instrumental in understanding the planetary evolution, we will begin to discuss how and why this volcanic activity becomes a consistent part of the evolution of the planets and will be very seriously noted as far as understanding exactly how the planet evolves. So think of Mercury as the first stage of planetary evolution, and it remains in bondage under the sun as long as it can, until the second planet comes along and blocks the connection or weakens the solar magnetic force in a short period of time, therefore allowing Mercury to move slightly outwards with its concurrent motion which has been created by the volcanoes, and allows the second planet, which would have been the newest planet to be ejected by the Sun, to take its place. Therefore, this planet, which is the new planet, becomes in a solar system Mercury, and the second planet, which has been pushed aside and goes further away from the Sun, becomes what we come to know as Venus. Now, I want you to look at this in the context of not only our Sun, but in the context of other suns in the universe. And because of that, to understand exactly how that as we speak today, that this process is ongoing in many galaxies, some that we have seen and some that we have never seen. So as a result of this process, you are beginning to see that there is a pattern where the Sun gorges itself on hydrogen, becomes replete or full, and then at the end of its digestive period ejects the planetary body, allowing it to circulate around it, thus creating a planetary body. I know this is a theory that many of you haven't had time to think about, but I would also welcome questions and comments as we continue, and to ask any listener to provide me, as I would have great interest, in any other plausible explanation for the process by which the planets are there. The scientists have indicated that there was this big bang and the planets cooled and formed these balls at the same time. The question is, how come all of the balls are not similar? And how come each of the balls represents a different characteristic that is not similar to the other? The only ball that is similar is what we come to know as the moons. And this is a very significant component of the explanation of my theory. And we will deal with that later on during the discussions. But I would like you to imagine that it is a critical part, and that a moon, and I will say it very quickly, a moon is a fully evolved planet. So absorb that a little bit, and that will prepare your mind as we continue for a greater understanding of that. Mercury continues on, and Mercury exhibits all of the characteristics of a surface planet of uranium. So what occurs now is a process which I would like to enter very quickly into. There is a process which is called the decay of uranium. This process is a process by which uranium becomes thorium, becomes polonium, and eventually becomes lead. This process takes approximately, as far as scientists have realized, 4.6 billion years. This period of time that uranium decays, it has been known that all these elements have been formed by a process of nuclear transmutation, which is well documented. So it follows that if we begin with uranium, which is the evolution of copernicium, then the decay of uranium would create, in an environment of high energy, temperature, and pressure, a nuclear transmutation process which will create not only uranium but also many other elements that are related to uranium. Uranium forms lead, and I would not like to go too deeply into nuclear transmutation, but those of you out there can Google it and you will understand the process of which I speak. Nuclear transmutation, which is the breakdown of uranium, forms lead. And the best way to explain the transfer of uranium to lead is to take a white sheet of paper and take a piece of lead or a lead pencil and mark that area. Once you have marked that area, you will see a black line, which is a lead marking, which is created by the lead pencil. I also want you to take a piece of carbon, any carbon, coal or actual carbon, and mark the same white sheet of paper, and you will see a consistency. Let us call it that those two elements can be cousins. So it means that either carbon came from lead or lead came from carbon. Uranium is radioactive, and lead, that's why you can get lead poisoning. Lead has some radioactivity. Carbon is not radioactive. So it means that lead is closer to uranium than carbon, which means that along the evolutionary process, that lead would have been formed before carbon. As a result of this, we would understand that the formation of carbon being after lead means a significant thing for the development of the planets and for the calculation of time as far as the planets are concerned. And this being a critical issue, I will give it one recording completely on its own as the next one. This process by which the planets evolve and which the elements transmutate is the basis by which we are on this planet today, and is the basis by which we evolve and the planets evolve, and is of critical importance that I will deal with.